All right, let's go over how to calculate a standard deviation. First, sorry I wasn't around my computer a lot this weekend. I was moving. That's a little bit of a problem this time when you're moving during a pandemic because you can't ask a lot of people to help. So I was pretty busy this weekend and I'm too old to carry that many boxes, so I'm a little tired and sore today. But let's get back to standard deviation. So there's the formula for standard deviation. You watched a couple videos, hopefully, last Thursday and Friday that explain the standard deviation. So if you look, really what I'm doing is I'm taking each point minus the average. Remember, X bar is the average if it's coming from a sample or a small portion of it. And again, S squared of X is the variance. So after I get the variance, I'm going to take the square root of all this to get back to the standard deviation. So again, S squared is the variance, S is the standard deviation, and we use S when it's coming from a sample. We'll use the sigma symbol, kind of that Greek letter, looks like a circle with a little loop on the top, when we're finding if it's from the population. We're usually trying to find the population from a sample. So most of the time we'll be calculating this one. And you should have watched the video on Friday about why we divide by n minus 1 instead of n. Usually when you pick out a sample, you're going to underestimate your average spread or your standard deviation. So if I divide by n minus 1, my answer gets a little bigger. So if I take 1 divided by 4, I get 0.25. But if I take 1 divided by 3, I get 0.33. So it's a little bigger answer. So they call that an unbiased estimate. All right, that's a lot of review. So let's look back here. So if I look at this formula, here's my, say, 4 test scores that I got on some tests that I took in this class. And they don't have to be in order. So in here, I'm going to take each one of those scores minus the mean. So the first thing I have to do is calculate the mean. So down here, I'm going to hit my little button, say average. Okay, I don't want that to pop up. I can just highlight those numbers that I want to average and hit enter. Okay, so my average test score was 83.25. So each one of these, I want to take that point minus the 83.25. So I'm going to say equals 80. Whoops, let me back that up and put a parentheses in here. I want to take my 80 minus the 83.25, and I'm going to make that an absolute reference by sticking those dollar signs in, just so I don't have to type the formula several times. I didn't really need the parentheses. I don't know why I put that in. Okay, so I hit enter. So 80 is 3.25 under the mean, so that's why it's a negative. And I'm going to fill this down. Okay, now I'm just going to do a quick check here. So I'm going to do a summation of what those numbers add to. So I'm going to do a sum, drag those up here, hit enter, and notice I get 0. So because I always get 0, because there's some below the mean and some above the mean when you're calculating, that's why I square the values so I have something to work with. So you have to square those. So in here, I'm just going to take that answer, and if I use the caret key, which is right above the 6, I can square those. Okay, so when you square those, all the numbers become positive, so I have some numbers to work with. Okay, so all I did was take each one minus the mean, squared them. Okay, remember that this means to add all those up now. So I'm going to add all those up. I'm just going to say equals sum of those numbers. Clear that. Or excuse me, close that parentheses. So this stuff inside here, the summation, is 86.75. Now it says I got to divide that. If I take 1 over 3 in this case, because n is equal to 4. I have 4 test grades. So 1 over 3 times that is the same as dividing by 3. So I'm just going to take that answer that I had divided by 3, and I get 28.91. Now that is the variance. So to get the standard deviation, I'm going to say equals STDEV. That's the formula in Google Sheets for standard deviation of that number. And hit enter. Whoops, I screwed up somewhere there. Let's see what I did. Okay. Equals STDEV. I have to click on it, so I just want the standard deviation of that number. Let's try again. Oops, I don't want standard deviation. Sorry, I want the square root. Okay. So again, that's the variance to get to the standard deviation. Because we squared it, we have to take the square root. That's why I was getting a weird one. So let's type SQRT of whatever I got in D13. And there we go. And I get 5.37 is my standard deviation. Sorry about that little screw up. Okay. So that was a lot of work. Here's what's nice. In Google Sheets, you can just say equals STDEV, which is the standard deviation, and you highlight your 4 test scores. Close that off, hit enter. I get the same 5.37. So one more time, just equals STDEV, highlight your numbers, close the parentheses, and it gives you the answer. If you're doing it in Crunch It, you use the descriptive statistics, it gives you the answer. But I want you to see where that's coming from. So really what a standard deviation is, it's an average distance away from the mean or another measure of spread. Now standard deviation, because we're using the mean inside the formula, if I throw in a real big number or a real small number or outliers, this will be affected greatly by that. So it's not resistant to outliers, just like the mean is not. So if you have outliers, it's probably better to use the IQR for a measure of spread. And if it's symmetric, okay, it looks like a bell-shaped curve, then we use the standard deviation. We'll get into that a little more later. All right, that was a little long video, but hopefully that explains a little bit about how to calculate the standard deviation.